Do you ever pause for a moment and listen to the way you talk to yourself? Are you your best friend or your worst enemy? My culture, the political environment I grew up with, and also the worldviews passed down by generations shaped me an anxious person. I care way too much about others' opinion, how I could fit in and survive, and was definitely risk averse. I realized that my mindset and essentially myself is the obstacle blocking me from achieving my goals and reaching my full potential. I started using Notion in late 2019 when I came across one of Ali Abdal's videos. Since then, I've been obsessively planning my days, paving the path to get to where I want to be. I managed to quit my corporate job, pivot my career from accounting to music therapy, and start a business. Life's awesome. But something's still missing. I'm mostly happy on a daily basis, but I always find myself in this gap between where I was and where I ultimately want to be. It's hard enough to go against what the society and mainstream media tells you where you should be. And it's another thing when you have goals you really want to achieve, but you're constantly doubting yourself. You know that nagging voice always telling you that you're not enough, that you can't achieve X, that you'll be better if you go back to the traditional path, and that someone is doing a better job out there. It's annoying and frankly unproductive. As I said, I was highly anxious. I liked overthinking, so I started dumping all my thoughts on Notion in an attempt to analyze and even interrogate my thoughts. You can see in both 2020 and 2021 my daily journaling word count is around 700 words. I do think about my thinking a lot, and the pandemic and the lockdown was definitely not helping. I am a music therapist, and I'm also a human being just like you, and I'm not immune to setbacks and negative emotions in life. I would not say that I'm never going to feel anxious again, but over the years I've tried and developed strategies to help manage and regulate my inner voice, both through Notion and in real life, combined with the lessons I learned in my own therapy journey. And I'm going to show you all that in this video. This strategy to tame your inner voice consists of 4 parts, and I call it the CODA system, which stands for capture, observe, distance, and action. If you want to access any Notion page I mentioned in this video, link down below. Everything's for public access. You're welcome. Oh, also, I'm starting this new series called Find Your Rhythm, in which I will explore all the tools, mindset, habits, routines, everything that help us find our state of being that aligns with our goals and our true self. It's not just a musical pun, but since rhythm is related to time and repetition, it ties in nicely with personal development. What do we do with our time? What routines do we have? How do we coordinate and synchronize ourselves in this world? All that kind of things. So let's get started. Let's quickly address this. Our thoughts can make or break us. Mind is a powerful thing. We as human beings are always trying to make sense of our experience. This is how we form our worldviews and beliefs. We tell stories to ourselves. This is also why we should be mindful about how or why we think certain ways. For example, if you made a fool of yourself in class when you were, say, 7 years old, you might start telling stories that you do not belong here, you do not fit in, you're not good at public speaking, your friends don't like you, and so on. Whatever event it was, your brain labels it, creates a story, and starts changing your behaviors around it. Constant self-doubt stunts our growth, makes us vulnerable and afraid of trying new things. Life starts to stay the same, you're not learning and growing, you become stagnant or irrelevant. Caring too much about others' opinions stops you from reaching your full potential. Or worse, you end up regretting not starting what you really wanted to do when you are on your deathbed. And the pain of regret is awful. Our inner voice produces anxiety and insecurity, bad for mental health. However, the key here is not to eliminate our inner voice as a whole. In fact, it would be quite terrible if you don't have an inner voice. The key here is to learn how to talk to yourself in an effective manner. I came across Ethan Kross from one of the Art of Charm podcast episodes, and I became so interested in learning about the brain and why we think certain ways. So, I read his book, Chatter. The voice in our head, why it matters, and how to harness it. So Ethan Kross is a psychologist, neuroscientist, and he specializes in managing regulating emotions. This book, the first third of the section is like all research-based stories to illustrate chatter, its function, what's going on in the brain, and then he went on to provide some really practical tools to help us harness and manage our chatter. which can be done alone, with other people, or in certain environments. As I just said, the key here is not to eliminate chatter in your brain, but to rephrase and re-narrate it to serve us better. We can change the language and perspective of our inner dialogue. When we create distance from the situation we are in, we can be more rational, hence make better decisions. We don't need to be consumed by the negative emotions, which often lead to reacting to the situations, and then we make bad decisions that we regret later on. And now, on to my CODA system. C stands for capture. The first step is to capture your chatter. Pen and paper, Notion, voice memo, etc. I don't care. As Ethan Kross suggested, write about your deepest thoughts and feelings surrounding your negative experience for 15 to 20 minutes a day for 1 to 3 consecutive days. Really let yourself go as you jot down your stream of thoughts. Don't worry about grammar or spelling. Focusing on your experience from the perspective of a narrator provides you with distance from the experience, which helps you make sense of what you felt in ways that improve how you feel over time. I use Notion for this, unsurprisingly, whether in morning journaling or throughout the day in the mood session in the brain dump. I brain dump anytime, anywhere. And since they updated the iOS app, I think it's a lot smoother now, which creates less friction for me to just dump all my thoughts on Notion. And I also journal at the end of the day to reflect how my day went. We rarely stop thinking, so capturing what it is all about is the first step to understanding what's going on in our mind. O stands for observe. Once you have your thoughts recorded down, it's time to really look into it and analyze. Note that analyzing doesn't mean overthinking. It means spotting patterns. Are there any recurring themes? This is when the Notion tag comes in so handy. On a given week, I might be thinking about routines and lifestyles, productivity a lot because I'm actively trying to manage or change it. But when I get triggered, I might be thinking about relationships a lot. This pattern spotting exercise is life-changing, I kid you not. Before I started using Notion, I was just brain dumping all the thoughts on Google Docs. The problem is when I title each document the date, I can never look back and observe my thoughts unless I click on every single document, which nobody got the time for. Well, you do you if you use pen and paper. I'm sure you can come up with a way to spot your patterns. But Notion is just life-changing. The biggest discovery for me in the past year is that my anxiety is just, like to a point, extremely bothering me during my luteal phase. How did I find out? Observation. Spotting patterns. I have another daily tracking page on Notions for my cycle, for my energy level and mood, habits, for general well-being. And this is when I realized that I always had a significant dip in energy and mood on day 20. And now, do you see why collecting and analyzing data is so important? Without such awareness, you're just going through life without changing anything. And you become a victim of your own thoughts. But when I know that I'm always vulnerable on day 20, I can start doing something about it. I can implement strategies to regulate myself in order to stay productive, whether that be limiting my screen time, taking extra supplements, or going for an extra walk, whatever. As I always like to say, data tells stories. That's why I like tracking. That's why I like Notion. Now that we have the data and the themes, we know when we feel great and when we feel not so great. It's time to get out of our head and start creating distance from our thoughts and emotions. And here are some of my favorite tools from the book Chatter. Note that these are all the ways you can implement on your own. I do not include solutions from the book that involve other people. If you're keen, you can read the book. So the first tool is distance self-talk. Many people actually do that. Again, on Notion, I sometimes write things like, you can do this, you can get through this. You can also write in third person like, you got this, Venus. And in real life, I started talking to myself using my name and sometimes second person like you after finish reading this book. Before filming a cover video in public or training for pull-up, I basically give myself a quick pep talk. It's effective. As the book says, when you create a bit of distance from what you're experiencing like that, performance under stress will be improved, thinking is clearer, there is less negative emotion because there is less activation in brain networks associated with rumination. And the second tool is called Imagine Advising a Friend. I first heard of this through Stephen Butler's The Diary of a CEO podcast, one of the early episodes, when he shared his experience of how he gave advice to a friend by letting her vent and then pausing her and telling her that, look, I have a problem here and I wonder if you can help me. And he basically repeated what she just told him, and then immediately she smiled. And it's so easy to come up with solutions when you're trying to help out a friend. And I remember this story to this day because it's just so powerful. You know, there's a joke about how we are so bad at taking our own advice, and I think that's actually legit. We are so good at giving support to our friends, but so terrible at getting ourselves out of sticky situations. And this whole imagine advising a friend way is also linked to getting distance perspective from what we are experiencing. Imagine what you would say to a friend experiencing the same problem as you, then think about the advice you would give to that person and start applying that to yourself. Easier said than done, I know. But what I found is that from creating distance, we mostly take the emotion part out of the equation, and then we can better respond than to react to certain situations. Again, you can either talk to yourself or write it down. I sometimes draw mind map or even bring down a pros and cons list of each solution because I'm a visual learner, it works for me. You do you. The third way is to broaden your perspective. It's easy to get caught up in what we're experiencing or feeling, and our challenge is just through the roof. The book describes a natural antidote is to broaden our perspective. Think about how the experiencing we are worrying about compares with other adverse events that we or others have endured, and how it fits into the broader scheme of our life and the world, and how other people we admire would respond to the same situation. I personally don't think it's always helpful to compare, for example, me having to sing 3 hours under a K95 mask to kids starving in developing countries. Yes, I have a roof, I have a job, I have internet and all that, and my problems seem very insignificant comparing to the rest of the world, right? But it does not help me emotionally. And to better address the emotional struggles in order to come up with solutions, I actually have this strategy, I call it the cookie jar, and I implemented that before I read this book. So, what is a cookie jar? It's basically your list of past achievements or accomplishments. When you're distressed, your inner voice will start criticizing you, making you think that you're not enough, or you will never succeed. Keeping and updating this list is a great reminder for you to draw strengths. You need to send signals to your brain that you are capable of doing great things. You have all this evidence in the past to prove your inner critic wrong. Hence the cookie jar analogy. When you're having a bad day, just take a cookie. You will feel better. The last way is called time travel, which is my favorite one. Again, it's all about creating distance and broadening your perspective. So whatever you're going through now, ask yourself, how will you feel in a month, a year, or even a decade from now? Things will be less upsetting in the future than it is now. From there, regulate your emotions and really focus on solving the problems. Because most things in the end, like Linkin Park said, it doesn't even matter. Around this time last year, I was in my second lockdown in Sydney, and I was getting really anxious about not getting a placement, not being able to complete my course and graduate on time. I know it might sound quite unreasonable, but at that time, it was just amplifying my worries and then think about the worst case scenario and all that. But with this time travel method, I can look at my situation more objectively and understand that most of my emotions and immediate reactions are pretty insignificant. So A in the CODA system stands for action. And there is one quote I really like, and I don't know where it comes from. Starve your anxiety with action. At this point, you have your data of your inner dialogue from capturing and analysis. And you have distanced yourself from the situation that you're in. You can pause, think, and respond rather than to react to the situations. You have better headspace and mental clarity. It's time to come up with solutions and make decisions that you will not regret. So ask yourself the following questions. The first one is, in this situation, what is under your control? If it's not, is it under your influence of some sort? From there, focus on what you can control to drive away from the worst case scenario and stop thinking about things outside your control because there is literally nothing that you can do. And the second question is, what routine or habits can I put in place to maximize the best case scenario, or to prevent the worst case scenario, or to prevent myself from feeling like this again? You'll be surprised how tiny things actually matter. For me, it's to not scroll my phone first thing in the morning and the last thing at night. It's easy. It's the 20% that drives 80% of the result. And the last question is, how can I befriend myself? Instead of self-sabotaging, try practicing self-compassion. The more reflection exercise you do, the more you will understand that most of your inner voice comes from unmet childhood needs or unhealed traumas. When you address them properly, you can change your narration and how you see the world, and more importantly, how you see yourself. Because after all, the most important relationship that we can have ever is with ourselves. Your inner voice can be the conversation with your best friend, not a criticism that always brings you down. So this is my CODA system to tame my inner voice. Actually, it just came to me that in music, CODA is like the passage that brings a movement or a piece to an end. So there you go. It's time to end that unproductive, unhelpful inner critic and start befriending yourself. I'm also on this journey of rewriting my stories and healing my inner child. Hopefully in the future I will make another video on how to distinguish our inner critic and our intuition. Regardless, it's important to listen to ourselves. Always be mindful and self-aware. If you enjoyed this video, you will also like this video here where I talk about 5 ways to use Notion to improve your mental health. Again, all the templates are in the description box below. Thanks for watching and I will see you in the next one.